Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Eric and Kim here to talk about the book of Boba Fett, the fifth episode. Usually, I might say like the episode title right now before I even do the spoiler warning, but that itself is a spoiler. So I'm not going to say it yet and just say we're about to talk about everything from the episode. Full spoiler warning. There you go. If you haven't seen it, we're about to talk about it. 3, 2, 1. Full spoilers. You've been warned. We are going to talk about chapter 5, Return of the Mandalorian. They just told us right up front there, Kim, huh?
I know, didn't they? And I think we all kind of guessed that we'd be seeing Din Djarin again in this episode, or maybe the next, or certainly before the end.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of us expected a whole episode dedicated to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think even before the show even premiered, people thought Din's probably going to show up. Like, I think it was a reasonable guess that he might show up at some point. Certainly, last week's episode gave us a huge tease he was coming with a little bit of his theme. But yeah, the fact that this would be 100% him, not even sort of how some of the flashback episodes were like 2/3, and then went to the present day. This was just all Mando. I mean, we got a little Fennec there at the end, but Boba Fett himself doesn't appear in this episode. So let me ask, what do you think of this episode? And then how do you feel about it being an episode of the Book of Boba Fett?
Well, it's all tied in together. So I think I'm going to answer that question probably all in one. But like this series, I think has continually been unexpected and done things that we maybe didn't anticipate. And this is another episode that does that, and I love that. It's surprising in its storytelling, and that's really great. One of the things I've loved about this series is that it it's called the Book of Boba Fett, and it feels very much kind of like reading a book. Each episode is a chapter. They're called chapters, and like in a book, this episode is a chapter that focuses on a character that's not the main protagonist. And that's cool, and at the same time, it's also for a series unthinkable that you would supplant the main protagonist for a whole episode. But yeah, again, we all love the Mandalorian, so that's cool. It's great to see to catch up with him and see the next part of his journey, and I expect we'll find out it'll play into the next series of the Mandalorian 2. I love that this was all set in the present, except for the fact we had a little flashback, albeit a VO flashback. So we had the voiceover showing us the events from the Night of a Thousand Tears. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I loved about it was that it universalizes a key theme in this series, which is the theme of family or tribe, as it's been referenced as, by bringing the Mandalorian back and reuniting him with some of his fellow Mandalorians. We look at what family or a tribe means to him, and we know that Boba Fett has been contemplating this through his journey so far. So that's cool. They also mentioned the Jedi and their different ways, So on the other side of things, I love that we got to see my new favorite blacksmithing sequence, which replaces the gaffy stick sequence. We got a cool pimped N1 starfighter and lots of callbacks and Easter eggs. Lots to say about this episode.
Yeah. So, the whole thing of like it focusing on a different character, I was like, look, I mean, I feel like shows will do that. They'll be like, let's take a look at this character. But usually it's a supporting character from that show. I think the weird thing here is this is an episode starring a character who has his own show. So that is like kind of the odd thing about it. Is like, it's not like, oh, finally a look at the Mandalorian, because we get a look at him. That being said, I loved it. Like, I think, as someone who's been a little more, I don't know, troubled sounds more ponderous. I mean, I had some trouble with the pacing of the show, but also like sort of the fact that this show, like, I admire that it's trying to kind of do a different vibe, but I don't think it's always nailed it as far as what we should be focusing on. So I felt this in some respects underline that, because we talked about how last week they kind of seemed to catch up on flashbacks for Boba, and that meant that these last three would probably have a different thrust. I didn't expect, even though I thought we'd see, the Mandalorian, I didn't think it'd be like, let's just completely focus on him for an entire episode. And one of the longest episodes, by the way, we should mention, 52 minutes, I think, or 51 minutes. But that being said, I love this character, so I was very happy to spend more time with him. And yeah, like, you mentioned a lot of things about it that I liked, as far as like, yes, it also reflects on Boba Fett, because Boba Fett is a Mandalorian of sorts. I know that even on Mandalorian, they brought up the debatable aspect of his what he is, but the idea that there are different sort of levels of Mandalorian, different people who follow different beliefs, is something that intersects with both these shows. So it's cool to kind of, get it in here as well. I'm seeing in the comments that Nick Nalafi says, felt like a stealth Mando season 3 episode 1, and I'm here for it. So good. Yeah, to me, it felt like I'd say almost like a season 2.5, because it's showing us stuff we didn't necessarily have to see. Maybe like if he showed up with a new ship in the new season, we'd be like, well, of course he needs a new ship, but it's cool to see it, get made. So yeah, let's talk, more about like watching Mando on this journey, because that's what this episode was about. We should also mention that Favreau wrote this episode. He's written every one so far. But Bryce Dallas Howard returned from The Mandalorian. She's directed an episode each season. Did a hell of a job here. I mean, she's done a great job on Mandalorian itself. But what do you think of sort of this whole opening where we definitely dived right back in with Mando is back on the job. And once again, I can't remember, what does he say, warm or cold? This is the choice he gives there as he fights those dudes.
Yeah, well, first of all, I loved the abattoir setting, which, as a horror fan, I'm like, oh, what are we going to get here? This is complete horror territory, but it doesn't quite go down that route. But another genre that uses this kind of setting regularly is the gangster film. So, and of course, this series is largely about crime syndicates. So that makes sense. So although, we didn't quite get maybe the bloodthirstiness of a gangster film or the gore of a horror, we got a cool fight sequence, which started with one of the Clatoonians biting his thumb.
And I will say, there's always this thing about like, the Disney-fying of Star Wars, and they won't let it go too far, which, first of all, it's like, even though I do stick to George Lucas's thing of like Star Wars is ultimately for kids, which is to say it's for everyone. But this episode, I mean, Boba sliced that dude in half, which was pretty visceral on screen. And then, yes, there's been decapitations in Star Wars before, but he was carrying that guy's head around for a while. I thought that was one of the more darker things we've ever seen in a Star Wars. What about you?
Yeah, no, you're right. Of course, they dialed down the actual blood splatter on screen.
Well, don't forget the saber, it cauterizes. So,
of course, of course, which is why it was okay.
Right.
But yeah, that it was the biting, and then the biting, I think, was followed up with a headbutt from Mando, which is something that also Paz Vizsla used in his fight against him, I noticed. So I guess headbutting is a Mandalorian thing.
Yeah, well, you got the helmet. You got it, why not use it? I also appreciated that he gets that wound from his own Darksaber in that fight, and it sticks with him. Like, sometimes they, fight scenes were kind of used to people shaking things off, and I wondered if he would get the leg fixed by the back to tank that Boba has, but no. He kind of gets it fixed earlier, but I like that, he's a great fighter, but he can't come through every fight just unscathed.
Of course, and you don't want to kind of set up this idea in the Star Wars universe that it's easy to fight with a saber. And so he then gets the fight training later on from the armorer as well. So
yep. I also want to mention this environment we're on. We can't say a planet because it's not, but it was so cool. Because Star Wars, look, there's a lot of desert in Star Wars and Tatooine, and people debate if there's too much of that, even though Star Wars is showing different environments. But they're on a ring, like, like you'd see around a planet, but they've built a city on it. I don't know if you could actually do that, but that's okay. It's Star Wars. And it looked really cool. Like, I just thought what a cool new, first of all, just to be back to a total city environment, because we don't get a lot of that outside of Coruscant, but also just the visual of it's on this ring. I just thought was, I'm sure if the name is out there already, I don't know it yet, but this will be a cool new thing for us to see in Star Wars. Did you like the ring world here we got?
Yeah, it was cool. It was shot really well as well. You know, there were moments that I felt it was vertigo inducing. That image that we saw just there, I love that small moment in the lift was hilarious.
Yes.
With the fellow lift passenger just eyeballing him, and then
I mean,
anyway.
yeah, this was an episode that was, I'll dance around here for a second before we go back to the stuff with the armorer. This was a funny episode, even more than The Mandalorian, for moments like that, and the moments like when he had to check all his weapons to show the mundane. And of course, he needs a new ship. That's one of the things about him having to check the weapons. But what was it like if you're walking around in a world where there is sort of rules and structure in parts of it? I thought that was a great gag of like all the weapons that he had to take off to get on that ship.
It was cool. And also I thought, was it Starliner travel? It seemed like quite a nice way to travel, comfortable.
It did. I thought about how Attack of the Clones had Anakin and Padme do fly commercial when they're kind of going undercover. So it's kind of established. Plus they had that robot, the one that makes him check all the stuff, is another one based off of the Star Tours design of Rex, which all ties it together because Star Tours itself is like you're going on a trip. So a nice amongst the Easter eggy stuff. That was great. But moving back a bit to all the stuff with the armor, this was really interesting because we kind of got a catch up on what's going on with the Mandalorians and this sect, which just seems to be down to these three. Maybe there's more out there. They're not even sure. And also I thought it was helpful because you always have to keep in mind the different levels of Star Wars fandom and viewership, and the fact that some people never watch the animated stuff. And so she gives a lot of history here on the Darksaber and Tar Vizsla, the Jedi Mandalorian who built it, and I thought that was good. It's always nice to have a refresher, but also I think you can tell all this stuff is going to keep being important in all these shows, So I thought that was cool to get that. And then you mentioned we got our first sort of look at the Night of a Thousand Tears, or the the Mandalorian Purge, which I thought was very striking and cool there. I see that I'm not going to say your name right. I'm sorry. Luvia Lamak says flashback felt very Terminator. That was a definite purposeful homage, I'd say. What would you think? What did you think of the look here at the Mandalorian Purge?
Yeah, definitely. That struck me as well. I think it probably was definite, deliberate, and it was a short segment, but and obviously, as I mentioned, kind of peppered with the voiceover, but it was really moving. It got me in the feels.
No, it's very effective visually, and obviously gives a lot more weight to the evil of Moff Gideon, who's talked about a lot here, but he's not in the episode because he's part of this. Also, it was funny to see that they were the K2SO type droids, just because K2SO is like one of my favorite Star Wars characters, but of course he was a reprogrammed Imperial droid. So here they're not funny K2SO. They are just looking spooky.
Terminators.
Yeah. I'm glad you got away from those guys, K2SO. That's all I'm saying.
It is possible, with a bit of love.
That's right. A little redemption there. And then we had kind of some back-to-back Darksaber fights here. First, when like you mentioned, he's training with the armorer, and she brings up a lot of interesting stuff here, even again about the Darksaber. We're getting a lot of lore here about how it gets literally heavier for him if he's not sort of in tune with it and intending to really use it. You could guess maybe because he's not really trying to attack her. That's part of it. But then, of course, we kind of pivot into, I do think it's funny, some of these Paz Vizsla, I mean, they have a very hot and cold relationship, right, Kim? I mean,
they do. Yeah, I mean, looking back at The Mandalorian, he was really annoyed, Paz, that, Mando turned up with this Beskar that he had got from the imperial from an imperial deal, and to create his armor, and they clashed then. So and then, you know, in this episode they're clashing over the fact that he didn't kill Moff Gideon when he had the chance to.
Right. I mean, of course, but he had helped him. I mean, like they mentioned, Paz Vizsla was amongst the Mandalorians in a very crowd-pleasing moment on The Mandalorian, showed up to help. But yeah, he just seems to still have some issues with Din there. And then I will say it annoyed me a little, only because it was the convenience of it. It was funny when he wins, Mando wins the fight, so he keeps the Darksaber. And then she walks over and is like, have either of you taken off your helmet? And I get it. I think it's supposed to be like, well, this is part of the ritual. It just felt kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
I guess he just can't.
But now, you know, does this set up, you know, a new mission for him? Will he go and try and find the living waters that were beneath the mines that are now destroyed on Mandalore, and try and gain this redemption?
I think, yes, the two things that really jumped out at me here, again, because they have to pay off later, are that he has to go somewhere he can't go because, as far as I know, it doesn't even exist. And also her saying the Mythosaur, the sort of the Mythosaur rising up to herald the new age of Mandalore is something that's in their legends, but doesn't seem to be true. The Mythosaur, by the way, for those who don't know, is like a dinosaur type creature, but you know the symbol. It was the symbol he saw above. It's that sort of dinosaur looking skull that Boba has on his arm of his costume.
And that was, just to cut in, that was foregrounded in this episode at one point as well. Yeah.
So her saying that, you know, oh, there's this legend, the Mythosaur will return for a new age of Mandalore. Oh, you have to go back to Mandalore, but you can't because it's not really there. That's all gonna happen, right? Like, so we're all
at some point, yes.
Yeah, this feels like a lot, because especially because like they are in dire I also really appreciated, though, like, because we've learned that Mando is part of like the most hardline old school Mandalorians, these ones that won't take their helmets off, but they're also the only ones who survived the purge because they left, because they were like the sort of outcast by how hardcore they were with it. So, but now they're down to such small numbers. Again, maybe there's a few we know about Bo-Katan, which we can mention in a minute. But yeah, it just seems like the Mandalorian, especially because we're all wondering, what is the Mandalorian even going to be about now that it's not like get Grogu to safety, you know? And maybe it's going to be more about this, like the rebuilding of Mandalore.
Yeah.
And even if it's a background thing as the show progresses. I also thought, again, giving people information that they don't quite know, if they didn't watch everything or even remember all this stuff, is like the Bo-Katan didn't win the saber in battle. She was given it by Sabine on Star Wars Rebels. And so for someone like the armorer, that doesn't count, you know, like she was never the proper. Where do you think we'll see Bo-Katan, by the way? Again, it feels like there's a lot of Mandalorian season 3, but there's also the Ahsoka show.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, my instinct is that it'll be Mandalorian season 3, but yeah, potentially Ahsoka.
It's just interesting because we've heard Sabine is on the Ahsoka show, so there's another Mandalorian character. Yeah, we'll see. But didn't they actually, Kim, I'm remembering as I say this, they teased 2 Christmases ago or 2 Decembers ago when they did the big reveal that they were doing all these other spinoffs, that it would all, they acted like it was going to aim towards some event. Supposed to include the show that Gina Carano was going to be on. What was it called? The Rangers, Rangers of the New Republic or whatever it was.
Oh, Star Wars Infinity War.
right. So I feel like, we will probably get some sort of mini series, some sort of thing here that intersects all these characters, and Mandalore and sort of saving Mandalore feels to me like something that might be a big part of that, to give them a new world.
That makes sense, you know, and that's impressive because as we know, you know, the sequels in the main movie continuity were not that well planned out.
Right. And now, yeah, it's like because you've got sort of this brain trust with Favreau and Filoni, who again,
Yeah,
Filoni is not, his name isn't on this show, but clearly, he and Favreau have each other's ear. And I believe Filoni has directed one of the last two. I think, again, not officially announced, but I think it was reported on that we still have a Filoni directed episode to come here.
it's very
Um, and then a gift for Grogu I put in the notes. He has. This was also interesting. I was laughing about the fact that they keep giving the Mandalorian cool stuff for people to collect,
yeah,
and then they destroy it.
yeah,
So the Razor Crest, his I forget the name of the weapon, the two-pronged weapon that came from the holiday special, and now the spear that he got
yeah.
from Ahsoka. But that they basically, it was interesting again to have her say, the armorer say, hey, that spear can pierce our armor, and that's not what Beskar for. So we're going to turn this into something else. And he's turning it into a special gift for his little guy, Grogu.
I mean, we saw those little rings that seem to result from the melting down, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know whether they're all in this Grogu shaped head package.
Right.
But that's not all of the spear. Surely she must have made something else with that spear as well. I don't know. He initially said make armor out of it. Do you know anything about these rings, Eric? What are they?
No, I don't. And then, yeah, he says make armor. And then, of course, that the wrapping looks like Grogu's face. Is
Yeah.
that just a cute little touch? Or is it a little Mandalorian helmet for Grogu?
Yeah, well, maybe.
I
Who
mean,
knows?
come on.
I don't know. I thought, oh, is it chainmail? Is he made because is it a suit of chainmail armor for Grogu? Not in that tiny package.
Right.
It also looks like a snitch. Maybe it's a snitch.
There you go. They're going to really tie in some stuff here. Another question from Luvia Lamac I see is the little friend Jin is going to visit Grogu? If not, who do you think it is? It's Grogu. I mean, that would be dirty pool, right? If it wasn't Grogu.
Yes. But will we see him in this series?
That's my question too, because this is where you're like, do we still follow him next episode, or does he come back to Tatooine having visited Grogu? Do they save that for Mandalorian season 3? And I could see that maybe going that way.
Yeah, same.
And then we mentioned the trip, flying commercial to get to Tatooine, and really the last like third of the episode. It's funny, on one hand, not a lot happens because it's really like all focused on building him his new ship, but it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
Right?
And oh my God, Peli Motto dated a Jawa.
Oh my God, hot goss from Tatooine. That is a lot to think about. It's funny since we've never seen Jawas without the robes on, but she says they're very furry.
Furry, I know. Update the wiki quickly.
Right. I love Amy Sedaris. It's funny because they certainly push the wacky comedy here. And first of all, I think it's smart because again, Din Djarin is not a laugh riot. He doesn't even take off his helmet. So giving him someone big to bounce off of is a good idea. They maybe pushed it to the limit with some of like her chasing around that Womp Rat or whatever it was with her droids. But I still enjoy her presence and her hard selling the Mando on this ship she's building him.
I did, yeah. And that, between and she would clearly, if he was somebody else, if he were a bit more foolish, she would definitely, stiff him here, I think. But he's wise to it, and she knows what she's doing, and he does. So they build a ship that's pretty handy. I think it's gonna set up a cool finale with we've yet to see Boba Fett riding on the Rancor, and if the mods come back in with their multicolored bikes, at least we get some cool rides.
That's true. And I think some people complain about it. It's certainly a hey, I know that thing moment, that it's one of the Naboo ships from Phantom Menace, but it's cool. It's cool looking. My only thing, if I were the Mandalorian, is be like, hey, way less space than his old ship. Like, you know,
Yes.
where do I keep all my carbon frozen prisoners? All that stuff.
And he can't eat his dinner in there, can he?
I mean, not as comfortably, you know. They pulled out the where the R2 unit would go, so I guess that could be for a passenger or a little Grogu viewing port when they meet up again. Oh, you know, a delighted Grogu is going to look out that little bubble.
Oh, if I don't get that now, Eric, I am quitting.
I know, no, we're gonna get it eventually, I think. But no, this was really fun. When he goes through Beggar's Canyon, I got flashbacks to playing Shadows of the Empire on Nintendo 64. And then we get the Space Cops, the return of Star Wars Space Cops here, which I enjoyed. What do you think their jurisdiction is here? Seems pretty wild.
I mean, they were like typical cops, weren't they? I am not doing that paperwork. Just let him go. You want to go back to the office, he said, and start filling in all that paperwork the rest of the day? No, come on.
No.
Leave him.
Very understandable. I saw I did not spot this myself, that the new X-Wing pilot here, the one we did not see on Mandalorian, was a fun little Easter egg cameo itself. It's Max Lloyd Jones, who was the on-set young double for Luke in the Mandalorian season 2 finale.
Right.
The guy who evoked a young Mark Hamill enough to get that role. I think that's probably why they had him grow a little facial here, so he just wouldn't look like Luke, you know. Exactly.
I think his character's name is Lieutenant Reed.
Yes, I believe so. And look, again, as you mentioned, it's like, will we see this reunion with Grogu? Begs the question, will we see Luke Skywalker again? All of which I think might be too much for this show. Like, as much as they did this episode, I still think maybe they keep that off screen for now.
But, you know, I'm still expecting, you know, more muscle than just Din Djarin to come in and help out. So, you know, we're still looking for him potentially to bring some more people in. It did cross my mind that Grogu could I'm just desperate to see him again, that little fella.
I know. I think you're gonna have to wait till this fall. But I guess, I mean, the big thing here, because even when Grogu left at the end of Mandalorian season 2, it's like, man, I mean, are they really gonna like I mean, of course we're gonna see him again eventually, but will we really go a long time without seeing him, given how like beloved he is and important to the show? And I think this episode tells you no. I don't know if he'll be there all the time, but even the fact that he's going to go bring him a little gift, you know.
Oh, dear.
And he was bonding with the little Rhodian kid on the ship because it reminded him of his little sweet little baby boy.
So fatherly now. It's just adorable.
It really is. It really is. Let's see. Go a little bit more into the comments here. I do like James Bunt asking, is Mando going through empty nest syndrome or midlife crisis with his sports starfighter purchase?
Wow. I mean, he didn't want it, did he? So, you know, he's made the best of it. I can't say it's midlife crisis, so probably empty nest syndrome. Yeah.
Right. Maybe that's why he let it go. Yeah. He's, well, you know, it's kind of cool. So.
Oh, I wanted my Razor Crest, but this'll do.
Right.
Oh, wait, it does pack a bit of punch. So.
Right. I'm gonna miss the leg room, but look how fast this is. John Bainbridge asked, do you think Boba will fight Mando for the Darksaber?
Oh no, I don't.
I don't think so, because I just don't think Boba cares about the Mandalorian leadership. Like, even if he considers himself a Mandalorian, again, that's been a fan debated thing for years, I don't think he's like, I should lead the Mandalorians. We already wondered why he wanted to kind of take over for Jabba. I don't think he's now like power mad, and I should be in charge of everything.
And he's establishing his own new tribe now, which incorporates Fennec Shand and the Gamorreans that I like to think of him as a father figure to, and the mods. and maybe Chrysanthemum, let's see what comes of that relationship. He's establishing a new tribe.
Yeah. This is man, some people they go to sort of dark, sad places here because Zeno Hour asks a little ways off, but should we expect Din will have to kill Bo-Katan?
Well, I mean, only if if they fight again over the Darksaber, whoever wins that fight will, rightfully claim the saber, and I don't think that would result necessarily in Din killing her. So
yeah,
no.
I feel like they could come to a different agreement,
Yeah.
And especially like with Moff Gideon, he beat someone he actually did hate that he didn't have to kill to win. So yeah,
Yes.
Even though he got some shade from the other Mandalorians, we did learn that you do not have to kill the person in battle to be considered the one to get the Darksaber back. So I could see them having a fight maybe, but I don't necessarily think it's going to have to end fatally.
And this fight with Paz didn't end in death for either of them either. So
right, and he'd won. He just had to go and tell the truth and get out, become an outcast for it. Rainer City Update Channel asks a very important question. Do you think he likes now? I'm assuming this is about Boba Fett, but maybe it's about the Mandalorian. Do you think he likes Boba tea or feta cheese more?
That is a really tough question. I'm going to say feta cheese, because I like feta cheese more probably.
I'm going to go with the Boba tea. So we're going to have a split here.
What's your reasoning, Eric?
Just because I like the sound of it more.
Fair enough.
I'm glancing here. I see that King Garcia says, first the classic bikes. Now we have a ship with a visible souped up engine like a muscle car. Yeah, and I will say they are definitely, there was a lot of debate about those bikes, which I said I didn't love the look of, but I did not agree with some people online saying because it didn't feel like Star Wars. I just didn't love the look of it. But I also agree with people saying all this stuff is clear nods to George Lucas, who loved like old hot rods, and that's why there is racing in Star Wars, and he loves like 50s aesthetic stuff. So I think that's all nods to George,
Yeah. That's fair enough. And and there was color in the prequels especially.
Oh yeah. And I think we're seeing this, like, especially on a show like this, they are literally blending things from the prequels, the original trilogy, a little bit of the sequels, which we talked about how much they might be laying some groundwork there. It's all overlapping in a way that I think is cool to be like, hey, this is all one universe. So
and like Marvel has kind of rehabilitated some of the lesser liked movies by making them integral in later storylines, and it feels like maybe Star Wars is trying to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, even like Clone Wars has a series, helped strengthen the prequels because it gave a lot more sort of depth and detail onto Anakin's fall. And so I think there's a lot of room for all that here. You brought up something that I forgot to respond to because it was a good point about how it's probably, can it just be Din that they're recruiting as muscle? It doesn't seem like it. And I agree. I think he gets a whole episode because he's the Mandalorian, but I think others will probably show up. Like Fennec's probably going around to others that we're not seeing.
Yeah.
And we'll see that. And then I see Lucas here says, I think Boba may parlay with other Sand people / Tuskens to fill their ranks more. I hope so, just because I want to kind of come. I think, the stuff that worked the best for me in the early episodes was him with the Tuskens. So I kind of hope that comes into play again.
Yeah, and they really made a point of establishing how actually brutal and tough the Sand people were in this. They said no biker gang could beat the Sand people, and that was after they'd been massacred. So yes, I think that they will make a return.
Yeah, I think so, but I also hope so. I guess let's talk. Now we're going into the last two episodes here. I guess Yeah, an overall complaint of mine, repeating myself, but it's like I feel like the present day stuff, they haven't done a great job of sort of establishing like any weight to, like, they're going to battle with the Pikes, but I don't think the Pikes have been established as like a interesting enough like threat on this show.
Mm,
And even this episode, I kind of wish they would have found maybe a way to incorporate that in a little bit. So
yeah.
excitement about Mando being back aside, like how do you feel we're positioned here going into the the final two episodes?
It's really difficult to predict anything for me because of that. And there was some effort made to establish the Pikes in this episode as a in very real threat, as intimidating
Right, they're
through.
mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, through Pelimoto's words about them, and how, because the Jawas stole that, I forgot what it was called, that pipe.
Right.
um, uh, he calls them gutsy. The Mandalorian calls them gutsy to have done that. So, they're not people to be crossed, and that point was made here. But I totally agree with you. It feels like we don't really have a sense of how threatening they are.
Yeah, it's like we're told it more than shown it. It's just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a strange thing here. Oh, I just saw Zeno Hour asking me if that's the Vinyl Pro soundtrack behind me. It is. Uh,
Also, I wanted that pipe thing. Someone pointed out on Twitter, I can't lay claim to this, but that it was the same looking piece of pipe that Luke used to try and brace the garbage compactor walls in A New Hope.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's a purposeful visual nod, since they certainly
Yeah.
like to do that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess this was a really cool. Like, this was a great episode of Star Wars. To me, it did sort of spotlight some strangeness with the Book of Boba Fett as a show. That is the standout episode is starring a guy who has another show he stars on. But hard to deny that this was really cool. So I'm certainly hoping for more going forward. And Bryce Dallas Howard, right? She should get a Star Wars movie.
Definitely. I'll back that.
Yeah. So good stuff there from Miss Howard. So that's what we thought, guys, of the 5th episode of the Book of Boba Fett. We'll be back next week with the penultimate episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be having plenty more here at Fandom. Take care.